Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This one's going to be my first thoughts on Star Wars Resistance, the new animated show for Star Wars. I watched the first, I suppose, 3/4 episodes. The first episode is like 2 together, so, it's like, 88 minutes of content, but it was only technically called 3 episodes. But that's what I watched, and overall, I thought that it was alright. Immediately, I'm going to say I'm not going to be reviewing the episodes week by week on my channel. I really, unfortunately, don't think there's enough depth here in the series to warrant doing that. And I think the second and third episode, the first two I suppose, standalone episodes, to me, really highlighted that there's just not a lot of substance to this show week by week, at least early on. And for me, I don't really see all that much of a high potential for the show, like once it, I suppose, properly gets going. I think there's some interesting ideas. It's not like terrible or anything like that. This is not the new TMNT show on Nick, where I think it's just an absolute train wreck. Like, what are they doing? This is just a... I don't know why you made it so sort of like unappealing to hardcore fans. I know they said the whole thing of like, oh, this one's for kids, to kind of just all, before the show even came out, make it clear that, okay, we sort of know not every Star Wars fan is going to like this show. This one's for kids, so just be aware of that. I don't know why they did that though. I don't know why they purposefully, seemingly wrote the show to only appeal to kids. It's never something I like, especially when creators say that. Like, it's one thing where fans say that and it feels very dismissive when that's the main kind of dismissal of criticism. But where the creators come out from the start saying that, to me makes it feel like, oh wow, like what happened here? Like, were you forced to make it a little bit more simple and you didn't want to and you're kind of defending yourselves, or what? Either way, it feels like they were aware that the show was going to get criticism. It has got criticism, and that's the only real defense that I've seen for it. Obviously, the big issue I have with that, every time it comes up, is, one, stop looking down on kids. You don't have to tell such a basic and simple story to appeal to kids. The Clone Wars didn't aim low, and it still brought a lot of kids in. There's a lot of new Star Wars fans because of Clone Wars. Just look at the amount of people whose favorite character is Ahsoka and how popular she is. And that's not just because hardcore fans got behind Ahsoka. That's because basically, after a little bit, everyone was behind Ahsoka. Similarly with Rebels. Rebels had an appeal to kids, but also hardcore fans. Now, I don't think Rebels is that amazing of a series. I think it was very up and down. There's only, I think, a handful of episodes that are, I think, properly really good, but it was at least solid. Right now, this early on, I don't really see where those amazing episodes of Resistance are coming from. Just the basic setup of what's going on here. They're trying to lead you in, oh, the Resistance stuff is going to come in. Poe's there, Phasma's in the background, hints of Leia, and I suppose going into the future, hints that probably some of these pilots who are doing these races will end up becoming pilots in the Resistance, and that might set up stuff down the line. But right now, it just seems far too overly basic, and episode 2 and 3 were the best example of that. Of episode 3 especially, where what's the plot? These kind of teenagers kind of befriend Kaz to get close to him, just to get Jaeger's super fuel. They steal it, the guy nearly gets killed, Kaz saves him, and then in the background of the episode the whole time it's a bit of an argument between Kaz and Jaeger. Not a whole lot of substance there. It was somewhat of an interesting insight into a hint at Jaeger's backstory, with him being part of the rebellion. I think they confirmed it. But outside of that, there wasn't a lot to that episode. The second episode was somewhat similar, of just the pirate stuff. Just I didn't find all that interesting. It just again, I think both episodes just allowed like a reason for Kaz to kind of run around like a maniac and have all this kind of crazy stuff go wrong. Um, Come up with the classic jokes that are going to become the kind of in jokes for the series and so on. Um, Again, like I actually enjoyed Kaz as a character. I think he's somewhat interesting. I just don't see where the depth of this show is coming to the point where like I would actually want to review this show week by week. Um, and that's the thing, like, if there was depth here, I think I would review it week by week because I don't inherently have an issue with them, like, having this sort of racing side plot. Because I like sports anime and stuff like that. So if they were basically effectively going to have, like, a side plot being a kind of racing series tournament type thing, while there's also something else going on, that's fine. The problem here is that, like, even if they have that, like I don't feel that there's a whole lot of depth otherwise, because I had issues throughout most of Star Wars Rebels with how it sort of felt that like, oh, all we need to do is roughly hint at something benefiting the rebellion to make this series plot matter, when it was just, I think for the most part, far too mundane, far too dull and boring most of the time, of like, hey, we got 2 more ships. Great. Hey, we saved this guy from prison. He's now part of the rebellion. There was a little bit too much of that throughout Star Wars Rebels, of just, we got this thing and that's going to help the rebellion, and it's just being like, okay, that was a good reason to make an episode, but the whole episode itself wasn't all that great. It was just, you got this thing. There wasn't too much of a plot based around it, and while, you know, I thought the early stuff with maybe Poe and Kaz was actually somewhat interesting, the basic setup of the plot of like, oh, Kaz wants to become part of the Resistance. He sort of proves himself to Poe a little bit in the first episode. So Poe just kind of sticks him in as a spy on this platform to sort of just look out and see if he hears anything. It was just so vague that, like, it just feels a little bit too much like, oh, look, here's our location where a lot of, like, somewhat minor hijinks are going to go down, and, you know, Phasma, I suppose, at some point is going to, like, become interested in this facility, and there's going to be bigger battles that come into play, and I suppose over time, that happening, Phasma pressuring this rig more and more is going to force, I suppose, more of the racers to side with the Resistance. Kaz is going to have to come out from undercover and stuff like that. Like, you can sort of see the way it's going to go, but like, just the max potential of the series, I think, is ultimately probably going to be like them becoming Resistance pilots and that being about it. I will readily admit a lot of that is probably informed by the fact that, like, the sequel trilogy and how they've chosen to, like, develop just the world building around it hasn't been particularly great for me, and I don't think this is exactly where we're going to get those stories. In that, like, this is not going to be where we find out stuff about Snoke or, like, the, I think, origin of the First Order. I think the First Order is going to be here, and we're going to, I suppose, set up a little bit of, like, what exactly they're doing to lead into The Force Awakens. But in terms of answering the questions I think that we want, I don't think this show is going to do that. I'm not going to criticize this show for doing that because I ultimately didn't expect it to. But it's sort of I suppose, a situation of then what is there to this series? Because I don't think there's, like, that much appeal to just the story of the people on this rig that it makes it stand out all that much on its own. And then it doesn't have any of the wider, deeper consequences to, I think, draw more people in. And I think that's where the who they were appealing to comes into play. Of, like, I think they made a mistake when they decided to only appeal to kids and not really have that extra depth added onto the series to draw in the other fans. In that just feels like a net negative. Like, you've not really benefited by doing this. In that, like, realistically, an animated show is always going to appeal to kids once it's Star Wars and there's some level of, you know, action and fun to it. But purposefully, like, I suppose in a way, choosing not to have any depth there to appeal to any hardcore fans or stuff like that, just feels like you're losing out on an audience. And especially when you defend that by basically saying, oh, this show's not for you, it just kind of feels like, oh, thanks for, like, leaving us out in the third of your like 3 series. Bit of a just a always a weird one. Plus, as I said earlier on, the whole like continue to talk down to kids with this stuff again, that you can't have a proper plot or anything like that because it's for kids. When like shows like Voltron, The Dragon Prince more recently exist, Avatar, Legend of Korra, plot focused. You have to sort of pay attention to the episodes, but there's fun in every episode. There's action, and then if you do pay attention, it all links together and works out really nicely. And there's depth there that appeals to everyone. Why can't we have a show more like that? Rebels kind of did that, but like there's huge gaps between the big notable kind of connection moments. Clone Wars did it more regularly. I question how much of that is going to be in this series. As for some of the other aspects of the series, visually, I actually in motion, actually seeing it, I think the animation is actually quite nice. I like the art style, and how it works in motion actually works. I think it's just kind of unfortunate that it seems like there's a sort of low ambition series attached to this animation style, because otherwise I think it actually looks really nice. It seems like the voice actors are doing the best that they can with, obviously I don't think that a lot to work with, so that's fine. And overall it seems like this is there's a lot of work, a lot of effort gone into this series. I think there's just that mistake of it having this sort of lack of appeal on a kind of higher level to a lot of people. So that'd be my main criticism with this, of it not really having a lot to appeal to me, no depth, and it just being all right is a bit of a problem for me with Star Wars when I want it to be really, really good. I want it to add to what I know about Star Wars and all that sort of stuff, because it seems like they're trying to, in a way, fix some of the problems more recently with this show. That like you're seeing a lot of alien species in the background, tons of them in this episode, like Rhodians, Ithorians, which have been like a huge part of why like the sequel trilogy has been criticized, of just us not seeing any of those usually widespread alien races across the universe in the sequel trilogy. Now we are, so that's cool. But other than that, it really is just, I think, the writing, and I suppose just the intent, the aim of the series, that I think is just a bit off. Now, when I say I'm not going to be reviewing it to week, depending on how it goes, I may come back and do like when the season comes to an end, come back and do here were the highs and lows of this season, that sort of thing. Again, very, very dependent on where it goes, what the plot is, how much depth there actually is. So there is a chance you may not see any more content on this show from me, but there is a chance you may actually see some more. And if a season or two in, it's actually telling something quite interesting, I may pick it up to review. But as I said, episode 2 and episode 3, I couldn't imagine doing a video trying to review that third episode. It'd be like 2 minutes long. It wasn't great, nothing to talk about, and I get the feeling that that's going to be a lot of the very early episodes of this show. And for me, I don't really have time anymore to review shows that are going to, in a way, waste my time like that. Shows like Voltron, shows like The Dragon Prince can be plot focused, appealing to everyone, look really nice, have a lot of the aspects that this show does have, but also gets the stuff that Resistance gets wrong right. And because of that, I'm not going to sort of be overly apologetic or like be like, oh, I can look past a lot of this stuff because it's Star Wars, because it's for kids. No, like I don't think I should have to give all these allowances to this show just to give it a chance. Like 20 episodes in, it might have a really good episode finally. No, I've done that before in the past with like the TMNT 2012, where I probably reviewed that show for a couple of seasons too long than I needed to, gave it way too much of a chance. So with this show, I'm waiting for it to show me it's good enough to warrant reviewing it. I'm not just going to review the episodes just when they're not great, just to hopefully one day get to an episode that is quite good. So they're my initial thoughts on it. As I said, I want to make it pretty clear, I don't hate this show. I'm a bit frustrated just with, I think, the intent of, like, and I suppose the atmosphere just around the whole it's not for kids, that being the thing that everyone is saying to sort of deflect criticism away from the show. You're allowed to criticize the show if you don't like it. Just because you're an adult, it doesn't mean like you can't watch this or give your opinion on this show. Because, again, you know, that's just something the creators have said in an interview. Not everyone's going to hear that. Some people are just going to find out about this show and be like, oh, it's the third animated series after the Clone Wars, after Rebels, this is the next one. Those ones, I liked aspects of them. Of course I'm going to check this one out. And when there's not a lot to it, of course you're going to be critical of it. And just because they say, oh, we made this one for kids, doesn't mean you're just going to go like, oh, well, all my criticisms just disappear. It wasn't meant for me. When it's just like, this isn't like Lego Freemakers or anything like that, where like it's so clearly for kids. It's not even attempting to be canon content. This is new Star Wars canon content. It's like the first like mainstream stuff that's also in the sequel trilogy. That's not like comics or anything like that. So of course people are going to watch it who aren't kids, and because of that, of course, there's going to be criticism of it. So I'm a bit frustrated about that being a pretty major kind of thing that's coming up whenever I see criticism of this show. I don't think it's a very good defense. Like, defend this show by explaining to people why you think it's good, why you think it will have the depth that will come in, and so on. Just saying it's not for you is incredibly dismissive and doesn't help the discussion at all. So that's where I'm at. I think it's okay, but I expect better than okay from a Star Wars show. So that's my thoughts on Star Wars Resistance, the first couple of episodes. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.